Ladies and gentlemen, my name's Paul, hopefully having an amazing day. RTX 50, which is most likely at this point going to be powered by Blackwell from Nvidia, is shaping up to be absolutely monstrous in terms of the amount of performance it's going to offer. From Nvidia's own statements, it seems that this card is not going to launch until 2025, so it is quite far into the future. However, this does give Nvidia several opportunities to move on to new technologies. In this video, I want to talk to you about new memory tech which is going to find its way into RTX 50, along with some updates to the specifications and some performance stuff, and then we're just going to briefly touch on some info for Lovelace RTX 40 because there are a couple of updates, including the fact that the 4090 Ti is probably cancelled. So let's start things out with memory. As you are probably aware, memory has been a big criticism for the RTX 30 as well as 40 series. AMD have also kind of experienced some criticism as well, although I would say not as heavily as Nvidia, for good reason might I add. But Micron have a roadmap. I want to give Ryan Smith on Twitter credit for this, so of course I will link his Twitter account in the description of the video. I'm not going to go over all of this stuff because some is not applicable for gaming and that's the focus of this video. However, things like HBM3 of course will be very applicable for the server variants of Blackwell. But looking at GDDR6X, we are seeing 16 GB in terms of capacity. Now, of course, that's 24 Gbps it's running at. However, GDDR7 does knock this up to 24 GB. And it also means that we have additional memory bandwidth as well, up to 32 Gbps. So, of course, that is a significant uptick in the performance, but also a significant uptick, in terms of the capacity. What this would mean, for example, is on a 96-bit bus, you could then have something along the lines of 9 GB of memory. Of course, this will depend whether the low-end cards even utilize GDDR7, but that's just an example, and you can imagine what would happen if you go with a wider bus, for example, 256-bit. And that does bring us, speaking of wider buses, to something that Coppertite 7 Kimmy has stated. He said, combined with multiple sources, I can confirm the flagship of Ada Next will have a 512-bit memory interface. Now, he does not state what type of memory is being used, but obviously that would be absolutely absurd. From what I've personally been hearing regarding RTX 50, the performance target is roughly 2 times greater than RTX 40. It does come with some caveats. For example, how is that being calculated? Are we referring to FP32 performance? Are we referring to raster performance? Are we talking ray tracing? Is that the average? What resolution? So on and so on and so on and so on and so on. So it does become a little tricky. What I would say is I have heard that the flagship variant would have up to 204 SM. I'm trying to find out a little more information, honestly, concerning Blackwell. I'm actually working on a video about this, actually. So yes, I have heard that it does have up to 204 SM. And as for the cache, I've heard a lot of mixed things. One source has told me, for example, it's got 96 megabytes of L2, but obviously we are also talking about products which simply are not even close to being ready yet. And when it comes to Nvidia, they tend to just, well, change stuff. We all know that RTX 40 just had, I don't even know how many times I did bloody updates for that, and it's not necessarily, I mean, I'm sure some information was just wrong either from myself or just the rumours on the internet, but for example, you know, they just constantly were changing the specifications of RTX 4090. The power consumption, the number of SMs and so on just kept changing. So, and that was much further along in design stage. So it's definitely going to be very interesting. What I will tell you guys is that I have heard, and I've mentioned this in previous videos, that the SM structure is really different, and it's a significant improvement in performance across the board. So it's going to be very interesting to see what Nvidia does. This is not a leak, but just from what I'm hearing and just in general, I think they're going to not just double down on ray tracing, but I think it's going to really make path tracing a lot more realistic in games. I don't think we're going to have every game be path traced or anything like that, because it's still A, the software is just not there yet, and B, it's still going to be a big performance hit. But I think it's going to be a very interesting time that we're left with the next generation cards, and I do think they're probably going to outperform RDNA 4. That's what I'm hearing. Recently I put out a video that RDNA 4 is probably not going to be multiple compute units anymore. So the rumor, in case you missed that or have not been hearing, but basically the early rumors from myself of RDNA 4 is that it was basically multiple compute units on a base die. And it was a little bit like they were doing with CDNA, but with some differences, obviously. Essentially, the compute dies housed things like the TMUs, the shaders, blah, 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 and the base was obviously things like the display output and stuff like that. But from what I'm hearing now from multiple people, this is no longer the case. It was considered in a very early drafts of design, but they basically decided it was way too much work, it was too cost prohibitive, a couple of other reasons as well, and, you know, I think at this point, even AMD themselves have essentially stated that they don't want to make like a GPU which is super expensive and just eats a ridiculous amount of power. So I think they're going to go with a single. My brain is fried. Sorry, a single GCD, which is going to be probably just larger, obviously on a newer process. It's going to have a number of improvements like ray tracing and all the other bits and pieces you would expect for a newer generation, and I still think it's going to be pretty performant. I just don't think AMD are going to be making a card which is as fast as RTX 50. So it's going to be very interesting because next year, as I leaked with the roadmaps for Intel's Battle Mage, that launches essentially Q2 next year. There's been no delays on that. They've always wanted to. There are going to be some variants which are going to start sending out earlier, but that's not for public use, basically. Those are for like, you know, testing, that type of stuff. So developers are going to have access to them probably in Q1, and then Q2 it's going to, essentially you and I can just buy them from the shelf. And those are going to be roughly on par with the RTX 4080. I've heard from some people it's going to be a little faster, some people it's a little slower, but essentially, let's say RTX 4080. I think if they price them fairly well, it's going to be a great GPU. It's, of course, going to be down to pricing. And then they're going to have essentially, well, let's say 6 to 12 months before RTX 50 comes out, and then obviously they're going to get spanked by the high-end performance. But obviously not everyone is willing to drop $1,500 or $2,000 or whatever on a graphics card. I'm really curious to hear actually, what is your upper limit? Like, how much money are you willing to spend on a card? Because, you know, it's a lot of money, you know, for these high-end cards, and I'm sure there will be people who rush out and buy the 5090 or whatever immediately, but again, they are quite expensive, so it's going to be very interesting. But anyway, moving back to RTX 40 before I talk your ears off about other stuff, there is no 4090 Ti. This actually is matching up with my own info. If you've been watching the channel for some time, I heard the 4090 Ti is dead. I'm still hearing, though, that the Titan may launch. It's really hit and miss with Titan. The problem is, it's just, obviously you've got more SMs enabled, and Nvidia at the moment are making a killing on other GPUs for other industries, and I've heard Titan is really expensive if it does launch. So there is also AD103 and 106 versions, which are going to be RTX 4070 and 4060. Now, what I'm about to tell you guys, I have not managed to verify with a second source. So do take this as this information is probably wrong. I want to stress this. I have not verified this information with another source. One source did write to me and tell me that they think this is correct, but this stuff is new. So basically, this refresh is, from what I understand anyway, pretty new. I mean, Coppertite usually is pretty on the ball with this, and he's only leaked it recently. And from what I understand, this is the new internal decision that Nvidia are making. Now, I'm going to call it Super, but the name has not been apparently internally decided yet. But what I've heard, and again, I really want to stress this could be incorrect, is the 4060 Super would have 42 SM, and the 4070 Super would have 68 SM. So obviously that is a significant uptick. There will be some other changes as well with the cache and other bits and pieces. The memory configuration obviously would change. The problem is, it's still not 100% confirmed, of course. Nvidia themselves haven't confirmed this stuff. I'm just mentioning it because Coppertite has basically said it is real. And again, one of my sources did reach out and tell me that that's, you know, this is the new plan, allegedly. But I've only heard from one person yet. I have reached out to some other people, but time zones are an absolute pain in the ass. So, I'm working on RTX 50 video. I'm also working on a PS5 Pro video, which I've delayed now like twice because I keep hearing extra information. Oh, actually, speaking of PS5 Pro, a couple of sources reached out to me after yesterday's video, which I did say I was very suspicious of the specifications that were floating online. I was very skeptical for a plethora of reasons, and I've basically been told that the specs were definitely wrong in yesterday's video. As I kind of predicted, they just seemed very hinky to me. For example, the ROP performance alone would have been so low, they would have just not had enough pixel pushing throughput. And given, of course, they want to target higher frame rate 4K, and given that, you know, what I was hearing anyway, PSVR 2 is going to be a big thing, it just wouldn't make sense. Like, there's absolutely no point in having that amount of compute. And to be honest, 16 T-flops as well, which was the rumour, was also really anemic. You know, it was basically essentially 50% more power than the PS5 base model. It does have a later graphics IP and stuff, but it just didn't make any sense to me. So I'm pretty sure that those specs are wrong. But I'll give a much deeper update, or a more in-depth update, should I say. My brain, I swear, it is all over the place today. You ever have one of those days where your brain is just not doing what brains are supposed to do? Anyway, I think that's just about it with this particular video. Hopefully you have enjoyed it. If you did, well, it's YouTube and all of that stuff. I will see you soon. Take care of yourselves. Have an amazing day. Bye for now.